I felt that because we planned so much for this project and all the historics and all the people at John Minnie that have been involved in this project for years prior that have shared their knowledge and what they did previously, I think we were super prepared for this project. And when we got on site, it was hard work, working at nights, digging in hot pits and working in the summer and, working in a high profile area. But I think it came together so beautifully and we were able to execute this so precisely.
All right, thank you for joining us and welcome to the John Minnie podcast, where we explore all things urban horticulture indoors and out through the perspectives of the many amazing people who have made it their career. I'm your host, Mark Minnie, president of John Minnie Distinctive Landscapes. Our team is a purpose-driven company to make places beautiful by bringing nature to the places people live, work, and play. All right, welcome back to our 4-part project spotlight on the Winter Garden palm trees. The Winter Garden is an iconic space in downtown New York City and part of Brookfield Place. And at the heart of this space stand 16 Washingtonia robusta palm trees. And these trees are introduced to this indoor atrium at around 35 feet tall and grow upwards to almost 60 feet tall before needing to be replaced. And that replanting occurs every 10 years or so. And this replanting process entails a 3-year-long effort, but culminates in a 2-week overnight planting, which is the focus of today's discussion. If you haven't already, please take a listen to parts 1 and 2 of this project spotlight. Part 1 explains why we have to replant these trees every 10 years or so, and also delves into the history and meaning of this landscape. Part 2 highlights the 3-year-long process of developing relationships and tree finding. That latter process is a pretty wild one. And in this part, I sit down with Alex Sherba from the John Minnie Distinctive Landscapes team, who was the project manager for the on-site installation of the new set of Winter Garden palm trees. Alex is going to walk us through the unique challenges of this installation. It is a very complex and one-of-a-kind site, and what it took to prepare for this installation. Let us please start with a big thank you to Brookfield and the entire CBRE team who we work for to execute this project. Brookfield's commitment is noteworthy. If you look at this one-of-a-kind space, it's just a perfect example of their commitment to invest in one-of-a-kind spaces that nurture vibrancy and destinational moments. And to Brookfield and the entire CBRE team on site, none of this is possible without your guidance, support, and collaboration to get this project right. Thank you. If you guys enjoy this conversation, please kindly give us a like, a subscribe, or a review on whatever platform you consume your podcast. And be sure to stay tuned for part 4, the final part of this project spotlight, where we discuss the ongoing horticultural care. All right, without further ado, let's head over to my conversation with Alex. Alex, welcome to the John Minnie podcast.
Happy to be here.
Nice, man. I'm pumped to sit down part 3 of the Winter Garden palm tree installation project spotlight. Alex, you were the project lead on the on-site installation, so you're going to kind of walk us through, that phase of this project. All right, let's just start by giving an overview of what the installation is. Like, what is the total scope that needs to be done for this project from your purview?
Yeah, well, to summarize, the base scope was essentially removing and disposing of 16 existing Washingtonia palms, approximately 50 feet in height.
Yeah, I know it's probably like we're about right 50. You're looking at me like, I don't know. No, I think it's 50 above grade. It's probably like 50, 55 feet in total. Yeah.
Demoing and disposing of the foliage, the trunks, and the root balls completely. Excavating and cleaning out of 16 tree pits to a condition that the new trees can be reinstalled. An installation of 16 new Washingtonia palms, approximately 35 to 40 feet tall. It was about a week of demo and a week of installation.
Cool. So I'm going to ask you to, we'll go through a lot of the challenges of this installation later in our conversation. I'll ask you to go through like day by day. but I know obviously I was there with you on site every night, so I know that it was an overnight installation. Do you want to just walk through the audience like why this project needed to be executed overnight?
Yeah, so the overnight schedule is mainly based on pedestrian safety and clear, undisrupted access to the work location. The location is a public space that during days and even early evening is bustling, especially in the summer, with corporate businesses, restaurants, shopping, and tourists. It's a high profile tourist destination for the city. Um, Inside and out, especially in the summertime months, with this type of work and conveyance occupying such a large footprint at the space, it was the safest thing to do this work when there were minimal people present versus trying to manage public safety during the busiest time of the day.
Yeah, I think about it as like, it's definitely harder like to do work overnight and shift to that overnight schedule, but overall like a win-win. Yeah, and this space is Brookfield Place. They've really like turned it into like a cultural hub. There's like hospitality, there's office, there's retail, there's always like cultural events going on there. It's jamming. It's like a major transportation hub too. A lot of like foot traffic, just like going from one place to another. So it's a win to like just minimize disruption, I think, by doing this project overnight, right? We're not messing with the flow and activities and events and, the restaurants' schedules by doing it overnight. But it's also safety, right? So there's the win from our end, right? There's less foot traffic to manage and be mindful of because there's some pretty serious work that's going on, as we'll get into.
Yeah, and to your point, we don't have to then assign an additional 4 or 5 people to walk around and make sure
easily, because it's a huge space.
People are not going where they're not supposed to be going.
Yeah, it's a really good point. All right, so let's walk through it. So it's I laugh here because it's 2 weeks of work. It's a tricky project, man. It's a lot of work to get done in 2 weeks, and short time frames, which I think you're going to elaborate on here, I'm sure. So why don't you walk through like day by day what it looks like, this 2 weeks?
Okay. Everyone, get in your seats. Okay, so we broke up the schedule into 2 phases, demo and installation. We began on a Friday, July 12th, with delivery of our equipment to a staging area about 1,000 feet from the work location. The next evening, the demo began, so that brings us to Saturday, July 13th. So I'll just summarize how each night starts and ends, and then I'll go through each day within detail. Mm-hmm. So each night began around 8:30, 9 p.m., where we would all meet at the work area. The client would put down the floor protection and open these large glass access doors, which are in and out of the job site. We would begin with a group huddle discussing the tasks for the night and the safety hazards involved. The heavy work would commence around 9 p.m. There would still be some, I would say, a couple lingering people from like the restaurants and walking through, but definitely very quiet. And the nights would end about 5:30 a.m. with a cleanup of the space, putting the tools away and installing any safety barriers to prevent hazards to pedestrians during the daytime. The client at that time would then remove the floor protection, close the access doors, and then business as usual throughout the day.
Yeah. And I feel like you're being generous on some of those. So we could definitely start heavy work around 9 p.m. in the work zone, which we can like clarify later. Mm-hmm. But that staged area equipment that's 1,000 feet away that you said, that if we needed to get stuff between those points, that really couldn't be done till like 10:30, 11 p.m. at night. So like whatever we had in the direct site underneath the palm trees where we were removing and planting, we could do heavy work, but we had to have the equipment already there. But it shortened our day sometimes by like an hour and a half if we needed to convey some of the larger equipment from the other staging spot. And even on the backside, like it depends on what we were doing that night. Sometimes you could push it to 5:30 before you started cleaning up. But we had to shut down at like 6 a.m., right? So sometimes it would be like you have to shut down at like 4:35, depending on how much stuff you had to like clean up.
100%. And we could talk about that later within the challenges and stuff as well with this project. But yeah, that was a huge thing to consider, is your your setup and your cleanup time, because you don't want to be too late where you don't have the time to put your tools away and stuff, and then the space opens back up again.
Yep.
So starting with night 1 and 2, that was the removal of the tree foliage and the trunks down to 4-foot stumps. We subcontracted our go-to arborist subcontractor to perform this scope of work. Starting with the tops, they cut down 8 trees per night in about 6-foot lengths. So these lengths were generally around 6 feet. So some, depending on the caliper size, when they got lower, they would be a little shorter. Sure. The idea is the lengths were cut to a point where they can be manhandled and managed and pushed out of the space. Each piece was cut and lowered to the floor. They were carted out the door, where they were then loaded into a log truck. We could not use a chipper on site due to the noise constraints. It is close to a very residential area, and a chipper in Manhattan would just echo off all the buildings.
Yeah, probably like 3 a.m.
Yeah. Also, the issue with the palm trees is kind of like the fibrous wood structure to them. We couldn't chip a good portion of that wood because it would kind of just get entangled in the chipper and whatnot. So only about 50% of the tree would actually, 50% or less, just say, would actually be even able to be chipped. The majority of trunks were too large for the chipper, and the leaves would just tangle them up in the tines as well. All the leftover material was brought to our yard, where the chippable items were chipped to be mulch and the remains was dumped to be composted. So to summarize that, after all the materials were removed from site, they were immediately brought up to our facility north of the city, where they were staged until they can be turned into mulch.
Yeah, it's it's a popular and important question. It's like, what happens to these, the palm trees when they get removed? As you said, they're highly fibrous. They also retain a lot of moisture. So we did it different this year than we did, I think, 11 years ago, whereas we cut off the irrigation much earlier. So it helped them dry out a lot, which actually, when we were cutting them down, made them like less messy. Like 11 years ago, water was like spurring all over the place because the trunks hold a lot of water. So that was a little cleaner, and that was actually gives a higher success of how much of the parts of the trunk that we could turn into mulch. So we chip and mulch as much of the palm trees as possible, and we actually use that mulch to top dress 16 native trees, which we planted just north of the city. 16 being obviously in honor of the 16 palm trees that came down. Important piece of it.
I was actually looking forward to the trees spewing water out this year, so I was a little upset that we
made the right call.
That we made the right call and made everything easier. So that was 2 days of removal of the trees. On that second night,
removal of the trees down to the
4-foot stumps.
About 4-foot stumps above grade. Yeah, I got you.
Also, we started to get proactive, and on the second night, where it would not be a safety hazard, we started having our team members starting loosening the stumps and the root balls by hand with specific. We were using spade shovels, sawzalls. We got some specific shovels.
My favorite. Which one was it?
The root slayer.
The root slayer is the best.
The root slayer. And I use that thing. That thing's awesome. Root. What was the other one? The root assassin.
The root slayer was definitely more effective because it was like a pointier, less of a traditional shovel spade, just like really pointier, only like 2-3 inches. Wide at the topis, and it had like little shark's teeth like going down it. It just like went through the roots in the soil very.
Yeah, and these were a couple products that we had not used in years past, and we kind of did some research and saw that these were used heavily, I guess, in nurseries and people that are digging out trees. So we gave them a shot, and it actually helped a lot. I think that was the preferred tool, was the root slayer.
The root slayer. No, and it's not by far. It was like one of the more labor intensive, like manual labor intensive parts of the process, because any big tree is going to be like hard to like established root system. Big tree is going to be hard to dig out manually, which is what we're doing here.
Yeah.
But these trees, especially, just like they're not huge roots, but they're like so like thousands of millions of like fibrous roots, and it just makes like chopping through soil so arduous. It's not like really digging into like clean soil or planting medium. So those were actually a game changer. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's not, given the confinement of the tree pits,
Yep.
you can only chop one direction, and it's pretty much down. You can't go wide. You can't get leverage.
Yep.
What we did try doing also on that same night, we brought a manual come along winch, and we were tying tree stumps to each other and kind of just cranking them back and forth, trying to loosen them before the next phase of the demo, where we would physically be pulling them out of the ground.
Yep.
So that tree cutting and that beginning to assess the pits ended on night 2, and that brings us to nights 3 through 6, which was the second part of the demo phase, which was the removal of the tree stumps and the excavation of the tree pits. We worked removals. All the removals took place in the same order as we dictated the installation of the new trees. This way, there would be, if we ever had an issue on the pit, you wouldn't want to start the reverse direction and then your new trees come and the pit that it's supposed to go in is not ready. So the crews, again, armed with reciprocating saws and root slayers, spade shovels, chopped through this root mass and loosened these stumps as much as possible by hand. I believe we assigned about 2 people per pit. We had about 8 crew members, so we had about 4 crews of two-man teams just chopping at individual tree pits. Once the stumps were showing some signs of being detached, they were then rigged up using towing straps and a telescopic forklift or a lull. The lull, we would bring the piece of equipment in with the operator, and before we even tied the stump up, he would just start pushing it, trying to loosen it in the pit as much as possible. Then we would rig it up with straps, and we would pull the stump directly straight up right out of the pit. Stumps came out of the pit. They were lifted out. The stump itself, what do we say, 4-foot stump plus a couple feet underground.
Yeah.
Then once you take all the root mass into account, plus whatever, all these trees were built up on CMU blocks to prevent settling over time. So when you pulled these things out of the ground, you had, say, 6 foot of stump, 2 to 3 feet of roots, and then another 1 to 2 feet of CMU blocks. Yeah. So when you pulled these things out of the ground, they were close to 9 or 10 feet.
Yeah, like, massive.
They were wild.
Yeah,
probably 5 to 6 foot diameter and 8 or 9 feet tall.
Yeah, it's incredible to see like how entrenched the root system is and like what it was just like holding on there and like what it was pulling up with it. They were doing well. It's hard to get them out.
Yeah, once this conglomerate got lifted out of each pit, they were then brought out of the space outside. We had a 20-yard dumpster waiting, and we would set these all in the dumpster. Try to be strategic on how they were laying down so we could fit as many as possible. And then I believe all 16 stumps were removed in 3 days, and about 12 of the 16 pits were excavated within that time frame as well. So during our demo phase, our call it our removal excavation phase, that was 4 nights itself, we had 12 of those pits ready for new trees. There were 4 pits that needed to be addressed starting the next week during the installation phase. Also at that time, on the last day, we started prepping the pits for the new trees, and we installed the base buildup that base buildup assembly that would be beneath each of the new trees. The assembly consisted of, well, let's go back. Once we excavated the pits to a proper width that.
Well, excavated meaning like, yeah, because that was like hard. Getting the stumps out were hard.
Yeah.
And then we're like, whoa, that was hard. But then you had to like, they pulled up whatever they pulled up, right? The old CMUs and
exactly.
root balls. So then you had to excavate more, which was also brutal.
Yeah, and some stumps you pull out most of the pit. Other ones you pull out less of the pit, and it requires more digging. So once the stumps were removed and the guys got back in the pit, we were digging about, I'd say, 5 to 6 foot width in each direction.
6, yeah.
And then you're going down to the roof slab, which was approximately, 4.5 feet, 5 feet from, maybe a little shallow.
60 inches to grade, but not,
correct.
So, like 4 feet. Yeah, you're probably right.
About 5 feet down to the slab, and the existing soil within the pits was probably 2 feet below the floor itself. So
yeah, like 20 inches or so, yeah, give or take.
We all came to the agreement that we were gonna create this build-up assembly to these specifications, and we went with 3 to 4 inches of 3/4 stone directly on the roof slab. We put a layer of filter fabric and made sure all the gravel was level and compacted, and we started installing two layers of CMU block with the hollow side facing upwards, and that allowed us to fill those blocks with new growing media and heavily compact it within those blocks. And that was essentially our base, or our pedestal for our new trees to sit directly on. Mm-hmm. And this would promote healthy root growth over time, and it would create this base where the trees would not be settling over time as well in that space. Sure. So we ended that on a Thursday night, and then we started up the following Monday, which would be the installation phase of this project. The following 4 nights were the installation of the new trees. 4 trees would arrive on a flatbed trailer from Florida each night. So the goal was every night we have to get 4 trees in. No
wiggle room.
No wiggle room. That's it. You're getting 4 trees in. They're getting in before 6 a.m. and then next night you're getting another 4 trees in. There's no turning around after this point.
We're talking like these 37-foot trees.
Yeah. And this was important because each truck would depart Florida 2 days earlier. These trees are traveling in the dead of summer. They're not getting water for 2 days, and they can't sit on a truck any longer. Once they get there, they need to go in. So each truck would depart.
A few things too, right? Like, yeah, they need to get in. Also because of the site, right? Like, we can't just leave these trees like staged horizontally on a flatbed in the middle of downtown New York City, or horizontally somewhere on site. Like, it's a major public space that's opening up at 6. So like, these trees arrive one afternoon. You said you got to get them in because there's nowhere else to put them. And if you don't get them in, you also have another 4 that are showing up the next day because the other truck has already left Florida. There's like, it's all compounding. Like, so just like emphasizing that point, it's like those 4 trees show up, got to act with precision and get them in.
Yeah.
Making you nervous from remembering you about it. Played like champs, don't worry.
So like I was saying, each truck would depart Florida about 2 days earlier. And it arrives in New York City earlier that day. So the trucks would be in New York probably the day we were going to install them, that afternoon, that late morning. Mm-hmm. We wanted them there as early as possible so there were no problems with getting stuck in New York City traffic or road work, sitting across a bridge, not being able to get in the city. So the earlier, the better. So when we would arrive that night, the truck would be waiting there. Sometimes they would be a couple blocks away. We've been in constant communication with the driver throughout the process. So once we arrived to the site around 8 p.m. or a little earlier on those days because we knew the trees were coming. We would then escort the truck to the staging area if he was not there already. Sometimes they got a little confused. They would park a few blocks away. But by the time we got there around 7 or 8 p.m., we would make sure they're sitting in the staging area, and then they would be staying there for the couple hours until it was our permitted time to start bringing materials back and forth to the work site. This couldn't be done till at least 10 p.m. There, of course, right next to the staging area and in between the work site, there's a bustling restaurant. So we had to wait for that to close and people to leave before we can start bringing 48-foot trailers through the restaurant, essentially, to where we needed to work. So then the truck is there in the space. When it was our time to escort, we would have 4 to 5 people standing on all sides of the truck, one person directing in the back. And this truck would have to, if you can imagine this, he would have to back up in the shape of a sideways G is the only way I can explain it. He would have to go straight back, then turn forward, turn himself, go straight back for another few hundred feet, then make a complete right angle turn again, and then come straight back, then angle himself to make another complete 90-degree left-hand rear turn. So I don't know if it's actually a G or a.
It's hard. I know. Let's emphasize it because it's like it's a truck with a 48-foot flatbed. It's like the largest flatbed you can drive into Manhattan. Yep.
And plus the truck, you're at 65 feet.
Yeah, I think it's like long. Yeah, it's 63, right? 48 plus 15, about yeah, and you're backing it through this restaurant, like you said, PJ Clark's, New York staple down there, so it's always bustling
along water.
Yeah, exactly. So when it's on a marina, exactly. So you're like backing it down a marina once the restaurant closes down for the night, and then once you get down that long way on the marina, then it's like
it's a lot of turning.
Yeah, all I can think of is I think it's like one of the Austin Powers movies where he gets like stuck in the corridor and he's doing like 1,000 turns to get in. It's not easy. Yep.
And a lot of times when you get, I gotta hand it, the majority of these drivers were great, but a lot of times I cringe when we get deliveries from far away because there's a lot of people or a lot of drivers that are not accustomed to driving in large cities, let alone New York
Manhattan,
City.
Yeah, exactly.
So once we start backing this truck up, I'd say it took about the first night it took about an hour and a half to get the truck back, but average the other trucks took about between 45 minutes and an hour, and that's just straight backing up a truck from one area to where he needed to be.
Yep.
But then it got better. Once he got to the work location, now there was a door that the truck had to back in that had about 3 inches on each side of clearance. So once you got really close, we had to keep people standing by the door. One side of the door, you could totally not put a person there. So people had to, it was just constant watching and communicating with each other to get this truck backed into the space. And the doors, I don't know, on all sides of the door is just glass. So if anything got touched, it would you would know, and stuff would shatter, and it would be an issue.
Yeah, that's no joke. Yeah, the flatbed is literally backing into the building through this garage door. Yeah.
Yeah. Once we got over there, I think ahead of time, we had the guys kind of pull the tarp off the truck, get all that ready so it was prepped. We loosened as many straps as possible, just kept a couple on there so the trees wouldn't roll off. So once that truck got there, it was kind of all hands on deck to get these trees placed and installed. So we had a couple guys would go on the truck, our chief horticulturalist, as well as some others, to kind of inspect each tree, make sure there's no cracking of the trunks, no damage, no visible damage at that point while they're laying down and sleeved up. The other thing that was prepped ahead of time was we knew each individual tree, and we knew the location of each individual tree, and every tree was painted with the individual pit that it was going into. So that made things a lot easier on site, where we're not trying to figure out what tree goes where and in what order. That was already predetermined. And actually, while on site, we changed the method that we were going to install to. We were going to work from the right side all the way to the left, and then we kind of realized that the furthest left pit was hard to reach with the tree next to it. So we ended up switching that while on site, but because of the way the trees were loaded, that did not impact our on-site changes to our means and method.
Yeah, we did the corners and then the middle two ones as we entered the building. Yeah, and to go back to that, the tree pit per tree was painted on the grow pot, not the tree.
Sorry, yes,
but that would be weird. So, and that was part of it. So just to add context there, so that was determined in the last part of this episode. We talked about how we had multiple assessment and ranking sessions. Myself, Andrew, the chief horticulturist, and Bob Presner on the team down in Florida when they were in the shade house acclimating before coming up to Florida. In the last one of those assessments and rankings, we ranked the top 16, selected the 16 trees that were coming up, the ones that we were now dealing with and talking about here on the install. But during that last ranking, we also very methodically decided which trees were going to go into each pit. And there was several things we weighed in there, because we scoured thousands of trees, right, to select these to get 16 matching Washingtonia palm trees. But they're live trees, of course, over the past year and a half as well during acclimation. They're going to grow a little different. One might be 35 feet, one might be 35 and a half, 36, 37. So we're considering the space, all the different viewpoints and view lines in the winter garden atrium, which we're very familiar with, and very methodically determining which trunk, based on the caliper sizes, the specific heights, are going in each pit. So it's going to have the most intentional look from a design perspective, and having this symmetry and precision from all angles, no matter which way you're looking at it within the winter garden. So just adding a little context there, you're getting the trees now, and they have spray painted on them. Hey, this is tree for
on the grow pots.
Yeah, on the grow pots. This is 16, which means it goes into tree pit 16, mm-hmm. and vice versa, and so forth. Yep.
Yeah, and at the actually spray painted on the tree, but not really on the tree. on the tree protection was 2 rigging points also for us to strap to.
Sure.
So once the truck was in there, we had our riggers on top of the trailer. They would strap the tree at the predetermined rigging points with the lifting straps. We tied some taglines onto it. The tree, so that this tree is horizontal, it would be lifted up, a couple inches just so there was movement. The tree would then be removed from the trailer and placed on the floor right next to the trailer. We used some site materials to protect the trunk and to set the trunks on while we laid them down. When the tree was laid down, it would get restrapped in a different formation in order to pick it up vertically. And while it was on the ground as well, that would be the more formal inspection of the tree. The sleeve or the tarp that was around the foliage would be removed. It would be inspected by our chief horticulturalist to make sure there was no damage to the grow tip and everything looked intact. Check any loose bark or anything, pull anything off that looked out of place or was damaged. And then when we got the thumbs up, that tree would start to get rigged straight up in the air and then brought directly to the specified pit. So if you imagine the pit is now filled with dirt, it has our tree base down there. we'd throw some excess soil in there for leveling. And we knew the dimensions of the pits. The pits were complete squares, so we knew from each side of the pit exactly where the trunk needed to be. And with that, we were constantly checking with tape measures the entire time to make sure our trunks were dead centered of every pit. Once the tree was then lowered in to where, the tree would be brought to the pit, the grow pot would be removed. We would be teasing the roots as much as possible, also to promote good root growth, so the roots grow outward and not start to strangle the tree. Once that was completed, the trees would be set in the pit to the dead center location, and then we had people on every 4 different sides of the tree, looking above. So we had.
This is your favorite part.
Yeah, this is my favorite part. My nightmare.
4 spotters.
All my bosses. 4 spotters that are all my bosses and different sides of the room yelling at me.
Go left.
Yeah, exactly.
No,
so we all had walkie-talkies. We had one competent person on each side of the room. And it was kind of just like, a little to the left, pull it that way, until the trees were straight and they aligned with the whatever items were on site, whether it be the columns of the building, the joint lines in the floor, looking at every aesthetic piece in that room to make sure these trees look aesthetically pleasing. And I would think on average it was about an hour and a half per tree, give or take. Some we had, were a little harder to get in and then the first couple obviously took a little longer. But once we got the rhythm going, it was about an hour and a half per tree. They got set. We would then dump growing media within the tree and heavily compact it while we're soaking it in. Yep. Soaking for 2 reasons: to get that growing media packed down, and 2, because these trees have not had water in a long time, and any dryness in the soil is just going to pull the moisture away from the trees.
True.
And then those trees are set. Soil is up to grade. We then are connecting our drip irrigation lines around the tree, clipping them all in, getting ready to get hooked up. And then right above the drip irrigation is something new that was kind of determined this go around, as over time a lot of these trees were settling in different directions and were becoming off center in the pit. We designed a tree stabilization system, kind of using lolly column jacks on 4 points of the trunk. And these were then installed around the pits and around each trunk prior to closing the pits up. And this would keep these trees growing straight from time on. And these can be adjusted as well. So if a tree starts leaning one direction slightly, we can tighten these jacks to kind of push the tree to grow a different direction, instead of trying to do this by hand at a later date.
Yeah, that was a cool innovation that we put in there. Definitely.
And once these trees are in the ground, immediately we did, the service team was there on site doing an initial pruning of any damaged or dead fronds. Again, checking the trunks, making sure nothing was hanging off that could be like a hazard. Everything was pruned and aesthetically proper initially, prior to the next service visit that would take place, I believe, a week or 2 following our installation.
Definitely. Yeah, and to go back at I joked about it, the walkie-talkie setup, where when you're setting each of these trees, and we have 4 spotters, it's a huge atrium. It's not like they're just standing on 4 sides of the tree. You have to go to like all the way across each side of the atrium, and you're sitting there in the middle, trying to conduct and organize the team to move the tree one way or the other in the pit, while 4 people have 4 walkie-talkies talking to you, trying to give you directions, and coming up with that organization of communication was important, because like people, it impacts people who visit the space, but they might not understand like the attention to detail of that design and these 16 trees, which are like set in 4 rows, perfectly, to a T, like spaced out in the center of this atrium. The design of these trees is all about symmetry, right? Getting calipers that are as close as possible, heights as close as possible, and set in their pits in perfect lines, right? So you're trying to get that tree perfectly in this vault before we put the grades back on top of it. And when you look at the trees, when they're all set, they need to be, no matter which vantage point in that atrium you're looking at, there's like perfect lines like going down each row from north, west, south, east viewpoints, even the diagonals across the set of 16 trees. They have to be in these perfect lines, and it is a thing of beauty, and it's actually a really important part of the planting process that might not be even thought of until you talk about like, yeah, we're sitting there, looking at moving these trees back an inch or two, and that's not easy. It's a 37-foot tree. You can't Definitely. Just like, let's just shift it over a little bit. It's a really methodical and important part of the process.
Definitely. And being in front of the pit, it's impossible to see like this 40+ foot tree from all angles. Like when you're in the pit and you measure, it looks great. Like you're on center, you're perfect. But the second you walk 10 feet away, 20 feet away, you can definitely tell the differences where they're not aligned and whatnot. Yep. So yeah, it was definitely beneficial to have somebody on all sides doing this in real time.
Yep. Oh yeah. And then you do that for 4 nights.
4 nights.
Precisely.
And completed on schedule in 4 nights. Knock on wood. No, there were small hiccups, but we stayed on target and were able to complete the job when we said we would, and gave our client an amazing product that is going to be flourishing for years to come. So,
hell yeah, agreed. And as we walk through it, it's obviously a unique installation with a unique set of challenges. What do you think are some of like those most unique things about either the site or the installation?
Probably everything. Yeah. So one thing was the size of the work zone. It was a big area per square footage, but once you had to get items from point A to point B and then to point C, it didn't seem like a very large site to begin with. Also, where you have equipment, you have dumpsters, you have tools, and you have people working in all areas, and you cannot have obstructions in the way of when you're trying to get the work completed. We created an in-depth layout plan in conjunction with a written schedule showing who is responsible and the specific location of where we will be staging tools and materials, deliveries, and the order of work taking place. And that allowed us to kind of have different sections or assign different locations to different items. Another challenge was, like we said, working and bringing materials through a plaza on the water or a marina. A marina.
Yeah, it's crazy.
And as we discussed before, these trucks had to back up in a sideways capital G, but now I'm rethinking the actual shape. I don't think there is a letter that can describe, or a shape that can describe the direction these trucks had to drive.
Yeah, it was wild, and that last turn was a challenge because we said the size of everything, the size of the work zone, the marina, that wasn't. I mean, when you're working in Manhattan, everything's like not easy to just, you don't have a big wide open space where you can like bring the trailer to and unload your materials or whatever. So Manhattan inherently has challenges, but then this site specifically, it's not like we're rolling into a loading dock, we're backing down a marina. On the marina, it's, we're again minimizing the impact to the client and all their clients and tenants, right? So we can't ask like the restaurants to close down for 2 weeks and move all the furniture away, or any daily cultural events they're having. So, for example, we get to down the marina, past the restaurant. We got to back into the building that has 3 inches on either side of the door, right? Low margin for error. There was a event that they have throughout the summer there that they needed to operate during the day. So we were talking about backing in this 63-foot truck in total with about 75 feet of clearance. So it's going to require a lot of communication and a lot of unique terms to be able to make that happen. It's possible. It's just difficult.
And definitely, to your point, I mean, we walked this space numerous times. We measured the space. So we had to work with our client and work around these areas. And
I'm going to probably take you off of flow. We can keep going through challenges because I want to talk about some of the crazy challenges. Okay. But you brought up, a couple of things we did was walk through the site ahead of time. So why don't you I think it leads into addressing more challenges. What did preparing for this installation look like? Project meetings and internal meetings. What did that look like?
Yeah. So, we started, when I was brought into the project after the trees were kind of procured and whatnot, we started planning for this project almost a year in advance.
Yeah.
Internally, it started with probably monthly meetings, and then they got, they turned into bi-weekly meetings and eventually weekly meetings leading up to the project.
Yeah, weekly.
Sometimes even more than one time a week.
Yeah, weekly or more was probably a few months at least.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. So and that's the project planning that was so critical with all internal parties involved, right? Because there's horticulture, purchasing, estimating, fabrication, yourself. There's so many trades, technical trades on our team that need to be in sync. So multi-party meetings internally for several months, and then walking through on site too, not just internally, but with the client as well as subcontractors and drivers, right, to ensure we're prepared for all these contingencies.
So in our meetings, what the purpose was to essentially plan a schedule, dictate what we wanted or what we needed to execute this project, where we wanted to occupy the spaces on the site, and what our tasks were day by day. Once we hashed that out internally, a few months prior to the project, we met with the client and we told them this is what we want to do and when we want to do it and how we want to do it. They would then take the information we provided to them, they would review it, and they would kick it back with either things that they could not accommodate or restrictions that they had based on the site. And that's when that's when it was brought up to us, the working times that we were allowed, 9 p.m. to 6 a.m., but we could not bring equipment or materials in till 10:30, 11 p.m. Stuff like that was so as this planning was this project planning phase was in motion. We got more tidbits of information as it was progressing. So we would revise our schedule, revise our plan of attack as many times as we needed to accommodate all the parties involved.
Yeah, and ensure precision.
Yeah. And also on that schedule, it was I think it was really important that who was responsible for the certain tasks, whether it be John Minnie, whether it be our client, whether it be our subcontractors, what days, what times, what tasks they were responsible for.
That's so huge, and it sounds obvious, but just for the contractors out there who might be listening, that's critical. Mm-hmm. And you did a great job of forcing that, which is you got to be direct with your client. Sometimes here's your responsibility. Some people are afraid to be direct with the client, but every great project requires synergies between all parties, right? Contractor us leading everything for this success of this site, the client and what they need to do to make it a success, subcontractors, what they need to do. And then obviously even deeper, like you were very specific to internally. I mean, we had, I think you said our crew at biggest size, like project crew, was probably 12 people on site. That's plus any other leadership or horticulturalists or fabrication teammates on site. So it could be upwards of like 20 of us, but you mapped out every single night, like including myself, like as the, president and some VPs on site, we all had jobs, like specific tasks. And you were like, no, like if you're going to be on the site, I need to know what you're going to be doing and which night you're going to be doing it. So we can't be figuring this stuff out on the fly. We got 12 days of work and we can't go a single day later. So like everyone needed to know exactly what they were doing on which days from external to internal parties. Yep. So I just want to hammer that.
Yeah.
Through. And iterations of it too. It wasn't like, oh, here's the first plan. We're like, we tweaked that thing several times. Like,
and we did have to figure stuff out on the fly, but,
but to that point, like we definitely figure stuff out on the fly. Like we'd be bullshitting each other and anybody on the world, like any project, no matter how much you plan, shit's gonna happen. Like variables happen in the world, right? But when you plan precisely and think about as much as you can before and assign who's doing what and try to think of some contingencies, like this might happen, and plan for it, likelihood is even when you plan for contingencies, that exact contingency is not going to happen. Some other variable that was uncontrollable or unknown is going to happen. But when you've planned so much, the solution, the process of coming up with the solution of that unknown challenge is much more calm, collected, and quicker at arriving at a solution because you have a good plan in place, right? You've thought through everything. You know what you're supposed to do. You know who's supposed to do what. You've planned for some variables to happen. Then something else happens. You take a deep breath and you say, all right, we knew things are going to happen. And you just go through a mindset of like solving that problem in a much quicker and calmer collaborative process in the moment than if you did not have like that thorough plan in place. So I think that's a really important thing to hammer. Some people think, projects are always going to, have variables. So you just got to wing it and make it happen. It's like, no, the more you plan, the less the variables will throw you off guard at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Hell yeah.
Definitely. And another reason that this planning was so critical, we're doing this off hours. We're doing this at nighttime. So, on any other job, you got a problem. Okay, I'll call this vendor, or I'll get a delivery of this if I'm short on it. You don't have that option when it's 3 a.m. Like you can't do anything till the next day. And then the next day you can't do anything on site because you can only work there at night. So, that was definitely critical to make sure we crossed our T's, dotted our I's, and we had a backup. We had a backup plan to our backup plans in case something failed. And
that's a really good point. Yeah, the overnights is a challenge. Like it's a big variable. Yep.
So once we got a little closer, everything that we published on paper, we then brought it to the job site. We met the client on the job site and anyone involved, whether it be the people at the building, the facilities or engineers, the property managers, anyone involved. Everyone was looped into the process. Yep. So everyone.
Our drivers also just like having drivers assess, like not the actual drivers, but drivers of trailers assess the turn radiuses.
Exactly.
Kind of like game plan out how we would communicate that.
With them, we walked through it. We walked from where we were getting delivered. We walked down the marina. We walked into the space. We walked to the tree pits. We opened the tree pits. We looked in the tree pits. We pointed things out. We surveyed the areas as much as possible. And we were transparent with our client of everything we were doing and what we needed them to do in order for us to execute this project at their deadline and properly. And, I think that made those 2 weeks definitely like a well-oiled machine. We were working at night. what their responsibilities were during the day, whether turning off electric or hooking up plumbing for the new irrigation, etc. They were taking on those responsibilities during the day, and when we'd get there at night, the space would be ready for us to go from step one to step two.
True.
And
that's a really good point. It was like a beautiful collaboration between like client team on site and our team. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. No, what other challenges you want to highlight? I mean, I think we're emphasizing the intricacies of this project, but any other specific challenges you want to talk about?
Yeah. So within the space, we talked about backing a truck in. We talk about driving this telescopic forklift in that weighs, who knows, like 20 tons. We're driving it into a building on a floor, on a tile floor. So we really had to convey that information to the client ahead of time. Every location we would be bringing this equipment to, marked up a plan, showed the locations to the client. All these locations were reviewed by a structural engineer, so they could stamp the drawing and say you're permitted to go in these specific areas. You don't want to be in that would kill the job if your machine or your tree falls through a floor. Yes, that was a challenge, but that was something that got hammered early on. And when we were on site, I didn't even consider it a challenge because we had those areas approved and exactly where we were bringing materials through and whatnot. We kind of dabbled with this before, but the setup and breakdown time of each night, you had to know where you were in the middle of the night because on average, out of your working time, you had about 2 hours each night for setup and breakdown, maybe even more.
It was a lot, and it really I just kudos to you and your experience and how well you managed that, because honestly, I'm not as seasoned on site as I have been in the past, and like you just had a good grasp of like, we got to stop, we got to clean up the site at this right time, because it was no joke getting that site, clean, buttoned up and ready, because again, it had to like look presentable and be very organized and very clean
and safe
because it's a very public and high profile area. So it was an intense breakdown and setup each night, and it really shortened your true working time down, but you really had like that dialed in. You're like, all right, that's it, we got enough done tonight.
Yeah,
we gotta shut
Thanks.
down. Yeah.
And anything ahead of time, if we knew right away, okay, we're done with these pits now, start closing it up. So start closing everything up, put the cones around it so there's no hazards ahead of time while we continue working till the last second. So it wasn't like stop 10 minutes before we were getting kicked out and started putting all our stuff away and cleaning up the area.
True.
But we did pretty good with that. I think there was maybe 1 or 2 nights we came close to the 6 a.m. Deadline, but on average, they were kicking us out at 6 a.m. On average, we were probably done around 5:15, cleaned up, blown, everything put away.
Yep. I think it was the first night of tree planting.
First night, and I think the last night of demo also, and we were doing all the build up.
Sure.
Because we were also bringing materials down every day also, so we would have to take care of all the work on the list for that night, and then toward the end of the night we would back our truck up that would have like 10 to 14 pallets of material that would have to get offloaded, brought into the space, and then any garbage or debris or material that was left in the space had to then get reloaded onto the truck after the materials were taken off, and then get the truck out of there before 6 a.m. So there was a lot of stuff to keep in mind, just not what you got to be, as you're working in the present, you got to be thinking about the future, the next day, what you need on site and what you need ready to start the work on the following day.
Well said. Yeah, agreed. Hell yeah. Man, I'm not gonna lie. I'll share like one of my challenges. Like I just like think the sheer, the sheer pressure of the need for precision was intense on that project. Like, um, precision in like, I mean, like you listed it as one of the challenges. Precision is like literally like physical precision needed. Like whether it's like the small spaces or like the small areas we were backing into or the small pits we were working into or taking down 55-foot trees in a very small control access zone. So like precision from like literally physical space to precision of schedule, right? Like we had to refine the schedule and plan for all the contingencies because it was such we needed to get it done in this time. That was it. Like from like how much we wanted to impact the space, how much we could impact the space and shut down the site for. It was overnight. And you had 2 weeks. We had to get it done. Then, especially on the planting side, it was like there's no margin for error. We have 4 nights. Like the trees are coming, the trees are coming, the trees are coming, the trees are coming. Like those 4 times, like you have to get your 4 trees planted. So I think like that literally just creates a lot of like pressure, right, on the individuals involved. So I think we just did a good job with that. I think it was all about practice and preparation. We shifted to overnight very effectively. I know personally, like I shifted a couple nights before. I started gradually getting into that rhythm. Sounds crazy, but like literally I would like, to your point of you're in the present moment, but you got to be thinking about the day or two ahead. Like before every night shift, I would literally like sit there and just like visualize like what's going to happen tonight, like each night, like because then I would be like mentally ready to go in there and like not have all that pressure of like, yo, what are we going to get tonight? If we don't, oh God, it's like, no, I visualize this. We're going to get this done. If not, we'll figure out that problem as we go.
Mm-hmm.
So I think like literally just that
mindset
is like really important. And just adding that with like, we know how important this site is. We talked about it in the first part of this product spotlight. Marquee site, beloved by New York, has a heritage, and a history like post 9/11 of like a symbol of resilience. So we're like, all right, it's a big deal. We got to make it happen. So I think like that adds to like the human pressure of it. But, we prepared like champs and we played like champs. And I think that was like what it all came down to. But I think that is a challenge within itself, just the gravity of the situation.
Mm-hmm. Agreed.
Yeah. So like, I mean, you're a seasoned project manager. You've done not to pat you on the back so much, but you've crushed a lot of amazing jobs for John Mini team, just in your career in general. So I like to ask this question: like, how would you rank?
Never on time though.
What?
Never. Job. You always have an extra day on other jobs.
Well, so yeah. Well, I think that was one of the constraints we talked about. Is like how, it's like there's no.
You're done on this day. The trees are coming done by day. Like,
exactly. There's no shifting of this construction schedule. Yeah. So how do you rank the difficulty of this project?
Yeah. So I honestly would rank the planning of this project as a 9 difficulty
out of 10.
A 9 out of 10. Yeah. The execution I would rank like a 6.
Oh, okay, interesting.
Okay. I think there was nothing. I don't want to speak for everyone, but there was nothing. There was nothing we're not accustomed to in this project. It's planting trees, it's rigging trees, it's digging, it's working in New York City. Also this client, I started I've been here 12 plus years. My first week at John Mini, I worked at Brookfield. I've been involved there for a long time. I know the key players and the people there. And I felt that because we planned so much for this project and all the historics and all the people at John Mini that have been involved in this project for years prior that have shared their knowledge and what they did previously, I think we were super prepared for this project. And when we got on site, it was hard work, working at nights, digging in hot pits and working in the summer and, working in a high profile area. but I think it came together so beautifully, and we were able to execute this so precisely.
That's all.
I think the challenging part was you and other people during the planning. No, you.
Thanks, man.
No, you. I'm giving you kudos for challenging me and saying, well, if I put something on the schedule and you said, well, what if that doesn't work? What are you going to do? What if this happens? And in my head, I'm like, that can't happen. But okay, let me plan for if that anomaly happens, and we sitting there revising the schedule and these duties multiple times. I think I was just seeing colored squares in my mind from updating the spreadsheet so many times. But once we had a blueprint on exactly what we're going to do and a contingency for a contingency, it definitely made this project go so smooth. And
awesome. No, it's really cool. I'm surprised. Like, I was like, oh man, 6, like, it makes it sound so easy, but I think I think that's a testament just to your experience and your confidence, and I think that's pretty cool. Like, I felt the pressure, and I thought it was like definitely the upper echelons of like complex and difficult projects. I think it is, but I think you saying like no, like on site when I executed 6 out of 10, like, and I think that's just a testament to like no, like that mindset of like I've done this, like, and yeah, there's a lot of crazy variables and like big trees and unique aspects of it. But I've been here before and I've done this and I know this client and I know this space and I know this plan. Like, I got this. So it's cool that you walked on. You're like, nah, 6 out of 10, I got this, It's pretty cool.
And our team, who guys I've worked with for 10 plus years that are, assisting in this, like that, the comfort level and the workability that we all have together. And we, we know each other's next move.
Yeah, we got
all the time. That definitely, made this, this project seamless and flawless from the installation point.
Yeah, agreed. Best team, bottom line. And I think the mindset coupled with that experienced team is like we pushed each other during the planning process to be like, yeah, we got a lot of experience. Yeah, we've done this planting before, but that doesn't mean anything. Tomorrow's tomorrow and we got to like do it again. Like, so we were like, well, how do we do it great again? What can we do better? And there were innovations we added to the project, but we entered with that mindset. We didn't say, oh, we've been here before, let's just do it again. We were like, we've been here before, but how do we play like, professionals again and make sure we do it as flawlessly as we've done in the past, if not better. And we did, man. You should be proud.
I am.
Hell yeah.
Definitely.
That's all I got, Alex. I appreciate your time today, man. I mean that. Like, you controlled that site, you led that site. That installation went phenomenally. You prepared, we prepared, and we played like champions, and we crushed it. So be proud of that, man. And thank you for your time.
I am. Thanks for having me.
Much gratitude to Alex for his time today. Please stay tuned for part 4, the final part of this project spotlight, where we discuss the ongoing horticultural care for these palm trees. Just a heads up, this final part will come 2 episodes from now. Our next episode will be a special release where we review our recent trip to the annual Elevate conference hosted by the National Association of Landscape Professionals. It's a good episode if you want to get a pulse on what's happening in the outdoor landscape industry at whole. Thank you always to our listeners for taking the time to be here with us today. Thank you for joining us on this journey. If you guys have any questions, ideas for future episodes, or my favorite, any constructive feedback, please email us at podcast@johnmini.com. And a big final thank you to all our clients at John Mini Distinctive Landscapes. You guys allow us to make our passion, our profession. None of this is possible without your support and vision to bring nature to the places people live, work, and play. And again, a special shout out to Brookfield Properties and their partner CBRE. You guys invest in transformative and one-of-kind spaces. It's an inspiration to just play a small role for you guys. Thank you so much for your business and ongoing support. All right, this episode is a wrap. I hope you guys have a great day, and always be sure to find a moment today to cherish the nature around you. If you mess up, I can always edit it out later, but for you specifically, I'm leaving it in, man. All the mess ups, so don't blow it.
Okay. I'm all mess ups.